welcome to episode 1 of Ohio State Women's Basketball String Ting on MoSAG Sports Network. I'm Chris Hunt, along with Charles Kuhn and Scott Hallis, and we are very excited to finally be here to bring our opinions and some facts to you about Ohio State women's basketball. And let's start off with Charles. What you do for a living and your connections to Ohio State.
Okay, thanks. So I teach astronomy out at the University of Northern Colorado, but I did my undergrad at Ohio State, was a member of the marching and athletic bands there, so spent a long time attending and performing and cheering at the women's basketball games, traveling with them to tournaments, things like that. So I have a connection kind of dating back to when I was an undergrad there.
Awesome. And Charles and I go way back. We were at the Buckeye Battle Cry together, and now blog that's been dead for about 5 years, and that's kind of where Scott House and I first met, was at the beginning of the end of that, and relationship kicked off. We've been pretty good friends since then, and we've tried a couple other writing ventures, like That's What She Said. That lasted almost a year with a bunch of broads that we know very well in the Twitterverse. But Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I went to Ohio State, graduated in 1992, back when the men's and women's basketball teams were both fantastic, and the football team was, so-so. So I took a big interest in basketball back then, went to every men's game, went to a lot of women's games, and have just, followed the team since then. Currently, I'm a reporter with a suburban newspaper in the Dayton, Ohio area. And as you mentioned, I was part of the Buckeye Battle Cry towards the end. I jumped on kind of late and was part of the That's What She Said as well. That did slow down because of various personal obligations for everybody, but we've all, remained in touch and friends, and here we are.
Yes, here we are, and it's been a blessing to be able to do String Ting. Charles and I started this a couple years ago. Had a lot of fun. Had Katie Smith on. Had a couple assistants on. Tried to get Coach McGuff. Couldn't ever work it out because of how busy he is. We just had a really good time with it, and then due to some life issues, which we want our listeners to understand that we all have regular jobs. I mean, you heard both of them. We have demanding jobs. I have a job that requires a lot of time on a computer. And is now going to be requiring some time for me to travel. So for us to even work out a Black Friday get-together to talk Ohio State women's basketball, that kind of gives you a good indication of how busy we really are. I had to go look it up the other day. If you don't know, I am WVA Buckeye on Twitter. It's Ohio State Scott and Charles _ to BBC. We're all on Twitter. We'd love for you to interact. We also have a String Ting account that will interact with people regularly. And what we're really excited about is that we're all going to get back into writing a little bit for men of the Scarlet and Gray, specifically for Ohio State women's basketball. So we're really excited about that part, about Jeremiah and Tony and RJ over there, letting us help them spread their wings, and hopefully in the future, if I can get this thing right, we'll start producing a couple of men's basketball podcasts for them, and maybe a football one in the future. So I've been doing this about 10 years now, surprisingly, writing, and used to be on the radio as a kid, or a younger guy with young kids, and had a radio show that I really enjoyed. So I liked the aspect of getting together with a couple buddies and talking. So let's get down to business here on Please put your phones on mute. Let's get down to brass tacks here, guys. We knew heading into this season that this was going to be a young Ohio State team, and we knew that it was probably going to culminate into how did we put it, into a butt kicking at home against UConn this past Sunday. But really, Charles and Scott, it's been kind of surprising early on how these young kids have played in a good way and in a bad way.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I didn't realize how young this team really was. I looked at the lineups that Coach McGuff has used, and it looks like, if I'm not mistaken, consistently there have been as many as 4 freshmen and sophomores on the court at one time as far as starters. And you got Braxton Miller, the Oklahoma State transfer, I saw her play in high school. She's one of the best point guards I've ever seen. But I did not realize the youth of not only of the people on the court at one time, but on the entire roster. And it looks like it's a really good recruiting class he put together too.
Yeah,
I mean,
top 5
it's
class in America. Go ahead, Charles. Sorry.
So it's an extremely young team, and we've certainly seen signs of that. But I think it's encouraging, though, I mean, right off the bat, that McGuff is, as Scott said here, willing to put in lineups of 4 sophomores, 4 sophomores and freshmen, 5 sophomores and freshmen. He definitely trusts his young players, and also clearly realizes that you have to go through some growing pains with them, and we've seen that. And we'll talk about that as we look at a couple of the games here. That they show a lot of the classic signs of a young team, and that they'll get through that, but it's going to make for a more interesting season than we would necessarily expect.
Right, and one thing, if I can throw one more thing in there, one thing I've noticed is that, they're going to make mistakes. They do make mistakes, but they're correctable mistakes, and they're mistakes they're making at like 110% effort. They're not, as far as what I can tell, there are no lazy mistakes being made out there.
No, I'm in 100% agreement. The only thing, and it was interesting that I was listening to the broadcast, the radio broadcast headed into the Kent State game that night. The week before UConn they were talking about Janai Kroons and some of the things that she needed to correct, which included foul trouble, and she got into some foul trouble in the second half against UConn, which we will talk about. But it's just one of those things where the youth part of this game is really probably going to be at times a positive, but also probably their undoing as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. We're going to see a team that's going to grow, that's going to get better as the season goes on, but they're going to lose some games because of that youth, and it just comes with the territory. And I think, obviously, we want to see them do well this year. We want to see them hopefully make the tournament, get some more experience there. But I think it's definitely a season where we're going to have to keep in mind the long-term vision here, that this isn't the year that we're going to contend, but this is the year we get people moving forward towards those steps.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think an NCAA tournament berth would be like national coach of the year material if he's able to get this team to the NCAA tournament this year. I would even say getting to the women's NIT would be, a fantastic feat given the youth of this team.
Yeah, the Big Ten conference schedule, which we'll get into in depth later after things finish. You don't see they have Maryland early on, but you don't see them hitting Michigan State or Iowa until January. And again, they're only playing both of those teams one time, so it'll be really interesting to see how that part of it, that youth part of it plays out. And both those games, by the way, are on the road, so it'll be definitely interesting to see how that turns out. Not really much reason to talk about the Urbana exhibition game. They always feed up one of the D2 schools in Ohio for that exhibition. I think they're working down through the teams that are actually in the GMAC, which is a conference I used to officiate in. So it'd be probably a waste of time to talk about that. But they won that game 131-50, and then they played Valparaiso in Springfield at I think it was the Hall of Fame Classic or something like that, and that score really surprised me. They played really good defense. Charles, they ended up winning 89-38.
Yeah, I absolutely love seeing that, especially because, and I mean, I hate to say this, but this is something that I think at times we've seen struggles with over the past, well, really decade of OSU women's basketball, that defense has not been the strong points in a while. It started off, back when Foster was first hired, that was their calling card, and then they got away from it, and McGuff's kind of been back and forth on that in terms of how his teams have done defensive-wise, but they've always been much more offense-focused.
Yeah, and that's a great
I was
point.
happy with the 89 points.
Yeah.
French fries, right? Even for the
Yeah.
ladies. Yeah, I was because that's not been Kevin McGuff's MO. Kevin McGuff has been a innovative guy as far as trying to get the ball up the court and get shots off, and that's why he's recruited players like Kelsey Mitchell and others that are shooters, because that's kind of the state of the game. And interesting enough, they play Sacramento State in a couple of weeks, who is a guy that used to be here at Glenville State in West Virginia, Bunky Harkleroad, who I met a few times when he was here, and he's 5 in, 5 out every 2 minutes, and that's all they do is get the ball and shoot. They've set some 3-point records, some scoring records, and so that game will be really interesting to see. And we get into the tour of Ohio, so to speak, and probably a bad year to pick Cincinnati, Ohio, and Kent State. And Scott, you and I were talking about we were surprised that the Cincinnati game actually went to overtime, but Cincinnati's not a bad women's basketball team. They'll actually be pretty good this year.
Yeah, they should be. And there's really there aren't that many bad women's basketball teams in Ohio, no matter who you try and schedule from the state. Even Toledo's an up-and-coming program. I know they just got a commitment from a really good player from Springfield, Ohio. But you look at OU, you look at Toledo, you look at Dayton, you look at Wright State, UC. No matter who you schedule from the state, it's not going to be a like a football game against Rutgers. That's for sure.
No, or for that matter, a football game from a team in Ohio.
That's
exactly
too,
right.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Which is not going so well right now, except for at Ohio University. They're not doing too awfully bad with Frank Solich down there. 78-73 was the final in overtime. They played that game in Cincinnati. Then they came back home to Value City Arena. And I was trying to find Scott's tweet. It really doesn't matter. He asked, did we really just lose to Ohio University? And
that was pretty much the tweet. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was kind of feeling the same way. But Charles, you think this Ohio University team may be pretty good down the stretch, and this loss isn't as bad as it seems.
Yeah. No, I mean if you look at it, so Ohio right now is 4-1, with their one loss coming to a ranked Syracuse team, or at least ranked at the time, and they led for a bunch of that game. Syracuse had to kind of rally at the end to really pull that out. So this is a solid OU team, and they're a top 100 team in the RPI. So I mean,